Welcome to Iron and Ceramite, Librarius Omnis, where we explore the depths of the Black Library.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Iron and Ceramite present Librarius Omnis. My name is John, and as always I'm joined by Shane. How you doing, mate?
All good, thank you. Very good.
Good. Welcome back to our look into Battle for the Abyss. This is part 2. If you haven't already, please do go back and watch part 1 and catch up to where we are now. So far so good. We're enjoying this one. Bit of an 80s sort of early 90s action film for us.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely.
Big action scene out in the middle of space, and it's not going too well for our main characters at the minute. They've come across the Wordbearer's traitor ship, the Furious Abyss, after it destroyed an Ultramarine cruiser, and they managed to catch up to it, and they're quite surprised that they've uncovered some sort of heresy here, but they're not too sure quite how far it goes at the minute. What else have we done in the first part? We've met a few people, haven't we?
We have. So it's a gaggle of different chapters. We've got Motep from the Thousand Suns, Skrull and his band of Weld Eaters, which I think there's 20. I think there's 20 of them.
Yeah, 20 of them.
We've got Cestus and Antigues leading their honor guard, Ultramarine honor guard, which I think there's 10 of those guys. And then we've also got Bringar and his 20 Blood Claws. So give or take about 50 Space Marines that are on the side of good in this instance. Yeah. Although they've got their own, their own foibles with each other. Space Wolves and Thousand Suns not known to get on, especially following the Edict of Nicaea. And there's some, some bubbling under of the psychic. Psychic elements, with Motep himself being obviously very linked to the warp, but also Cestus having a vision of Macragge at the very beginning when the reactor was going to blow up. And then obviously, as you mentioned, we've had the first real engagement with the Furious Abyss, where, as I said, a few Imperial. So it's already taken out the Fist of Macragge, which had, 1,000 Ultramarines on board, and just they had no chance. They were totally wiped. And then we've just got to the point where they've engaged in the Furious Abyss in a naval battle, with obviously the fleet that they have is a cruiser. I think it's a cruiser from the Saturnine fleet, the Wrathful, and then a whole suite of support craft. I think there's 4 of them, isn't there? 4 of them.
Can you remember all 4?
I know there's the Fireblade.
Yeah.
Fireblade. Yeah, there's the Fireblade. There's the Boundless.
Yeah.
There's the. No, it's not Furious.
There is I'm sure that there's a Ferocious.
Ferocious, that's it. I was one beginning with Ferox.
And dear. We'll come across it.
There were definitely those 4, and then obviously there was also Motep's ship, the Waning Moon.
Yeah.
So there's a few of them. We're at a point where obviously the Furious Abyss has opened engagement and has taken out the Waning Moon. I don't know if it's taken out anything else at this point, because we got up to chapter 5. So obviously, we'll cover the next however many chapters. Yeah. But it's the first real engagement, and it's not going well for our plucky band of allies, let's say.
And we did have our fleet from the Boundless, the assault squad that were defeated almost without a single enemy round being fired, because they've released some sort of psychic energy which turned the crew on each other in all these vessels. So they're mid-retreat. When we left them, the Waning Moon is spinning in its death throes, and the rest of the fleet is looking on in absolute horror. Yep. And the Wordbearers, Zadkiel, the fleet commander, is absolutely loving life at the minute.
He is,
And I think that will bring us to the end of chapter 5. Obviously, hopefully you've watched the first part, and we won't have missed too much out. And I'll just get us up to speed. And we are on chapter 6 now. So unless there's anything else we need to cover, we'll jump straight into it, I think.
Yep, let's go.
So, chapter 6, The Void, Squadron Disengage, and Away with Words. So, as it says in the book, it feels like a lot has happened, but in space, everything's so far apart, really, although we've just gone through all these ships get blown up, the waning moons and its death throes, everything actually seems to happen in slow motion because they're actually hundreds of miles apart while they're battling. So these torpedoes are coming out, probably look quite slow, but by the time the ship can react, it's too late. So the actual expanse of space that this battle's taking place is like, you can't quite comprehend it because it feels like it should all be on top of each other.
Yeah.
But it's like the way that I think Acestus is watching it from the bridge of the raffle. It's like he's just sort of watching this horror play out, almost painfully slow for him.
Yeah.
But it's still like there's nothing they can do to stop it. And we're about an hour into this fight now, and then it kicks us back into it brings us back into reality and says, so when the waning moon died, when the waning moon dies.
I love waning.
Waning.
But yes, the waning.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna do that again. Right. So it brings us back into reality, and it says, when the waning moon died, it took everyone by surprise. So like I say, no one was expecting that, even though they could see it sort of coming. The raffle scanned the abyss for weapons. They thought they'd picked it all up, but the concealed plasma cannon within the golden book was completely undetectable. And not only is it a surprise, but it's like the deadliest weapon they know, called a plasma lance.
Yep.
And like Kaminsky's absolutely furious that they missed this, and like, how have we come toe to toe with the enemy, not knowing exactly what they can do to us? It's like unheard of, especially for this day and age for the Imperials. They're like on the brink of the precipice of technology. But obviously they've been won up by the Mechanicum here.
Yeah.
And Cestus just bats her off and says, it doesn't matter, we just need to destroy this, because he's focused. And he just pipes up and says, look, are we actually serious here? Are we actually intending to destroy Astartes?
Yeah.
I don't think he's quite comprehended what's happened. And Cestus like shuts him down, kicks him off the bridge and says, go get everyone ready to board. And in the meantime, he tries to raise Moteb like on the Vox, but they can't get through. So Moteb's not quite dead yet, although his ship is falling apart around him.
Yep.
The plasma lance has torn his ship almost in half. And as a result of it, this plasma hit fired through and almost like killed anybody that was sat by anything electronics, been fried. It set fires down all the corridors. You had the crew waiting in certain places to go and do like quick fixes, or the medical teams. They've all been incinerated. So anybody that's alive is probably unlucky at this point, I would say. And Motep's on the bridge with like the few survivors. His helmsman, he tells, right, you guys go and make for the escape pods, and I've got something else to do. And as he turns to go, the door bursts open, all this flame comes in and cooks the rest of his crew. And luckily for him, he's in his power armor, so it washes over him. And again, like the others weren't too lucky. So he needs to get back to his quarters. There's some stuff there he needs to get, and he's just casually sort of pulling his way through the wreckage of the corridors, stepping over people as he goes. As we saw Cestus before, back on Vangelis, when the crew were dying of radiation poisoning and just ignoring him, Motep's pretty much doing the same to him. So it definitely pays to serve the Emperor as a human, or not.
It's quite interesting the Motep piece, because as he's going through his ship, and it makes a point of saying, like, after the initial strike, because the void of space has managed to get in, and not the void in terms of the Imperium, like Imperium as it were. It's inertia, sheer inertia is pulling the ship apart. Yeah. It's just all of the physics are going wrong, and it's just pulling itself. And everyone, the crew, the human crew, are ending in very messy ways. Either like, they're getting sucked out, and like it's got descriptions of how like their eyes are iced over and all sorts of stuff, or they're turned into bloody paste on the ceiling, or like they're finding themselves stabbed and skewed on like jutting bits of metal as the walls are falling apart. So it's really brutal in terms of how it's doing. And Motep's just kind of striding through it all, because he's had a vision. He knows that he's not meant to die on this ship. He's got to go back to the raffle, because something has told him that's he's got something of importance to do there, rather than on the waning moon. And it is like a real like brutal, it's one of the things that I always talk about, right? That the Astartes, it's it was where the heresy came from, right? Is that once war is done, what's going to happen to these superhumans, these advanced humans that are no longer going to be needed? And it's they make a point of always kind of separating the Astartes from normal humans, as it were, to kind of show the difference. And this really highlights it, because, as I said, he's striding through, and it's almost like he's indifferent to it. And it comes up a couple of times that he says, even though like he's seeing it, the only reaction he's having to it all is that he knows that everyone on that ship would die again for the Thousand Suns and the glory of Magnus. And it's like, would they?
Yeah. I mean, they probably prefer to die in a different way, maybe like in an actual combat rather than just getting blown out. Because didn't it?
Or old age.
Yeah, well, yeah, there is that. Serve well, die happy. But didn't he have like he had a couple of squads worth of like spear squads?
Yeah, spire guards.
We haven't even heard of that. Like, they're gone, mate. They don't even get mentioned again. So whatever happened to them?
Yeah, no, they're not Astartes.
They were on the second half of the ship that went first, I think.
Yeah, but because he strides through, doesn't he? I was going to say, is this the bit he finds himself in his quarters.
Yeah.
And still alive somehow is his faithful serf, the guy that's been like there with his butler effectively throughout years and years, and he's like, he notices he's still alive, and like with his dying breath, using up like the last of the oxygen again, he says like, for the glory of Magnus or something like this, and he says like, put me out of my misery. And so Motep just pulls his bolter out and plugs him. It's like, okay,
putting down a sick pet.
That was it. It's just like, you've served the chapter well. Here's your pension. And that was that.
There's one other guy as well. Just before he gets there, it's like when like the void came in, there was one guy who managed to like fill his lungs with oxygen, holding his breath, but his like eyes are really like swollen up, and he grabs hold of Motep for help, and Motep just turns and shoves him away.
It doesn't kill him, like doesn't like put him out of his misery. He just you good luck, buddy.
Like, and you think like, he wasn't struck. He could have got him into his quarters, figured out a way to maybe give this guy some oxygen and get him the rest of the mission. But he just went, get off.
Because he's going towards a savior pod, right? He's gonna go and eject himself, and it's like, maybe not. They're small anyway. It's a bit cramped. I'd rather just travel on my
own. Guys. So loyalty does not pay off. So
what it effectively does is it takes out, like, the waning moon as a ship is gone, and as are everyone that's associated with it apart from Motep.
exactly that. And all he managed to do, well, what his main mission was, he got back to his quarters and had like a small sarcophagus on his desk, and he's taken out a short power wand and stowed that away for later. And he gets to the escape pod, no passengers to go with him, and launches off as the rest of his ship rips itself apart. And he sits there and prays that he will exact his revenge.
Yes, yeah, he's feeling quite a lot of anger towards the word bearers at this point, or at least it might not be at this exact point, but they do describe it in the book itself, which is unusual for the Thousand Sons, because Magnus has trained them all to be like really mentally strong and to elevate themselves above the emotional, which for those lorehounds out there that know about the Thousand Sons know that one of the reasons that is to try and stave off the flesh change that affects the chapter, but that will that will come later in one of the other books anyway.
Nice. Right, so back out into space, and so they sort of said the way that the Furious Abyss is carried, it doesn't traditionally carry fighters, or it's not like the sort of ship that should traditionally carry fighters. So that's why there's been no real, obviously the psychic attack aside, there's been no real resistance to like the Ferox, Ferocious, and Fireblade getting in close. They've been able to get in close and cause damage, whereas normally they would be waylaid by other fighters. But with the waning moon now gone, the whole of the Furious Abyss opens and fighters start to pour out. And these ships are actually like bigger than your average fighter, quite powerful, and they're in such numbers that they're looking like they're going to completely overrun like these freighters. And we have Captain Largo. He's on the Fireblade, and he's absolutely fuming. They've never run from a fight, but he's just watching all these retreating fighters getting ripped apart, and orders the disengage. The free ships break free, but the Ferox is probably the closest to the Furious Abyss, and attracts like the main swarm, and just gets like its engines get wiped out.
It's a drift, effectively, isn't it?
And the ship is crippled, and now like the crew are just sort of floating in the void.
The savior pods fire, don't they? They say there's savior pods coming out of out of it, but the fighters are swarming around it, picking them off. Generally being nasty.
So, and again, like everyone else is watching, so the Ferocious does a U-turn, goes back to try and save some of these pods, but it goes right into the path of the Furious Abyss. And the Furious Abyss unloads on it, and like as a result, the Ferocious is just absolutely destroyed,
obliterated.
The Fireblade is the only one to survive and get back to sort of the rest of the makeshift fleet. And like now they realise here the Mechanicum have like ignored any sort of imperial sanctions on weapons. They've created this absolute killing machine, and Kaminsky like orders everyone to regroup, but now it's too late. Like the Boundless has been targeted, and they're trying to get these messages now as in absolute desperation to say, look, we've come across this behemoth. Let's get some messages to the rest of the Ultramarines. Let's get some messages to Terra. Why haven't they been sent? And the chief astropath sort of pipes up and says that the Astronomicon is gone.
It's gone.
I can't get through. There must be a warp storm in the way. But
at this point, because Cestus can't believe it, he's like, what do you mean it's gone? Like the astronomical can't. Obviously, we know that there's foul play at large with stuff like that went on earlier. Like we know because of Horus's pact with the dark powers, as it were, that their supporters in the warp are going to help with distraction, and the warp storms that are effectively blocking the Astronomicon are doing that. So it's kind of like going back to the beginning. When the loyalist Marines find this stuff out, it's just total unbelief. Like, they've gone from a world where everything is hunky-dory and they're the alpha units to we're now fighting against other Astartes, which it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And now you're also telling me that the Astronomicon, the key guiding light of Imperial expansion, isn't there. It's like there's too many things that they just cannot believe.
Yeah. I think it's easy for us to forget now that we're like 8-9 books in, because we're like, right, we're ready for this. The Astartes on the Astartes, but yeah, like you say, this hasn't happened. Like these guys have never seen this before.
No.
Everything was black and white until a couple of hours ago.
Yeah.
And they've like just probably had one of their worst defeats as a unit. And following on from this, we have a bit of a disagreement between the Ultramarines now, because Antigus comes back to the bridge and says, "Well, we need to turn and head for Terra. We need to warn the Emperor." Cestus disagrees. Said, "No, this ship is going to Macragge. The fleet will not withstand it. We need to go, especially if that's just the harbinger for something bigger." And Antigus snaps to him and says that your emotion and your ego are clouding your judgment. And Cestus snaps back and says, "It looks like your loyalty has left you." And Tejas comes back and says, "Look, it's not loyal to die in vain." But Cestus makes him back down and says, "Look, no, this is the way to go. I've been right so far. We're going to go with my gut." And everyone sort of agrees with him.
Yeah.
So Kaminska suggests that maybe they pretend to flee and look like they're retreating, and then we can turn and follow the abyss, like, because it looks like it's going to move in and do a warp, a jump into the warp, and we can follow it. And as they're sort of making their mind up, again, reports come back. The Boundless has now been targeted, and the full firepower of the abyss has targeted now, and it never stood a chance. So what's happened while they've been arguing amongst themselves is we find out the Admech have done some experimenting, and they fired these torpedoes. I think we saw them before. Even the torpedoes, once they hit, they fire more torpedoes.
Yeah, they like drilling.
Yeah, and everything's just been shredded and crippled the Boundless, and then the book on the front of the Furious Abyss has been opened and sent the Boundless into extinction, along with quite a lot of the fleet so far. And the Boundless, I think, was quite a big ship as well to lose.
I believe so. It's a frigate.
Yeah.
Right, hang on, sorry, mate. I'm going to stop you there 1 second.
Yeah.
Just got to quickly run away. I'll be back in 1 minute.
Yeah, no worries.
Right. Back we go.
Cool. Okay, so So Zadkiel, he is really like smug now. All but 2 enemy ships have been destroyed.
Yeah.
And you can see that they've turned to flee. But by the time they get to Terra, it'll be too late. So he gives orders to enter the warp. If they decide to follow, then they'll destroy them. So as we said, the Rathful goes dark to simulate a retreat. And Kaminska takes a minute to mourn the loss of her friend Vorlov from the Boundless. I think they've been obviously travelling as part of the Saturnine fleet for quite a long time together.
Yeah.
And he's gone down sort of not in the ideal way that any sort of captain wants to go down with a ship against people they thought were their allies until a moment ago. So Cestus orders someone to go out and retrieve Motep's pod, because he's still sort of floating about on his own at the minute, and they get him on board. So once he's on board, he gives all the captains sort of the options and says that we could go to Terra, but if we do that, then Macragge and Calf are probably going to be doomed.
Yeah, they have like a little war council, don't they?
Yeah.
I think Bringar at this point already says, like, you've already made up your mind, haven't you, boy? And to which point, like, Cestus is like, yeah, and like the Space Wolf's quite happy about it because he doesn't like running away, as is Skrull, the World Eater, and he's like, yeah, that's fine. Let's do this. I think Motep is. he's sort of on the fence a little bit. He keeps his council sort of balanced, even though, like, I forgot. I don't know if we mentioned it in the last bit, but even though, like, in the start of the chapter, when Motep is first in the Waning Moon, he's contacted by Zadkiel, and Zadkiel sort of says to him, "Look, you can join us. Like, this is a secure line. You're okay." But Motep doesn't. So good on him.
Yeah.
But it definitely, it's an interesting thing knowing what we know where the Thousand Sons end up, which side they end up on. That, like, this heresy, this betrayal. It's not, people don't know what side they're on yet, and that's why it's quite interesting that you've got, like, World Eaters and the Thousand Sons at the moment on the side of the loyalists.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we saw, especially in the earlier books, where Nathaniel Garrow was sent to die because they knew that he wouldn't turn, and there were, like, on Istaban, Angron was killing World Eaters, his own men, because they were on the wrong. Well, he deemed them to be on the wrong side, but it doesn't. From what we know, not a lot of people seem to get the option. It was almost decided for them, like, just on their character.
Yeah, some of them, it was like, if they were Terran born, that was always going to be an issue. Like, rather than from, like, whichever chapter's homeworld it is. Yeah. I think. I mean, this is a total tangent. If you looked at it, like, Motep might be one of those that you would go. Thousand Sons are interested anyway, right? Because, as I said, they feel like they've been wronged, incorrectly, as it were. Yeah. Whereas the World Eaters, it's like, what would Skrull do? Would Skrull be like, I'm going to follow Angron? He may well have. The entire work with, like, World Eaters may well have been traitorous had they been given the option, but these guys aren't. They're just there fighting as Astartes.
Well, I think we'll definitely touch on it. Probably, maybe not in this part, but in the next part, definitely we'll touch on Skrull and how he stands a lot more. But then, like with Motep, he's already sort of said he's here to try and convince the Ultramarines that psychic powers aren't all bad.
Yeah, but we'll build bridges. He's there saying, like, because he's not allowed to use psychic powers. So any psychic powers he does use or manifest or is seen to be using would go against the edicts of Nicaea, and so he's there. He wants to build bridges, but he also knows he's not allowed to use any of his witchcraft.
Yeah, at the minute he's sort of, like you say, he's happy to go with the flow because he knows his fate. Almost, he knows where he's supposed to go.
Yeah,
and that is where Cestus wants to go. So he's not going to sway it at the minute, and also he's trying to win favour with the Ultramarine as well.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So they give the order to follow. Kaminska's not exactly keen to dive into the warp after this thing, but she gives the order anyway. And her and the Fireblade line up to follow.
Yeah.
On board the Furious Abyss, Zadkiel takes Altis down below decks to check on the supplicants, and he sort of says to him, like, what do you feel? What do you think of these supplicants? What are your feelings? And Altis says he doesn't have any feelings. They're servants of the Emperor, and like all of them, they wouldn't serve if they didn't expect to give their life for the word at some point. And, like, it's a bit of a weird thing because, that, like we've mentioned before, Zadkiel sort of tested him to see if he really believes what he's saying or if he just knows the lines to get him up the ranks. And he's not necessarily convinced by him. And they basically have a bit of a back and forth of the minds where really Altis, he comes off well. Any other commander would probably be quite happy to have him.
Exactly.
He's saying all the right things, but you can't say the right thing to this dude.
No, he sees him as an ambitious threat, and he's like, he's smart. He knows his stuff. He's doing everything he should be saying. So I'm going to make sure you're not a threat to my ambition.
Yeah. And as Zadkiel sort of measuring him up, they get word that they are being followed now by the Ultramarines. So he takes Altis with him and says, join me on the bridge and watch this trick we've got. And the Furious Abyss kicks out a large mine into the warp, but inside the mine is a group of psychers infected with poisons and driven mad. And now they're unprotected by any type of Geller field, free to spin off into the void and absorbing and spewing out the madness of the warp. And that will bring us into chapter 7, Ghosts in the Warp, Hellbound, and Legacy of Magnus. So following the Furious Abyss through the warp is a bit of a sketchy idea to begin with, but Cestus has ordered it, and that's what they're doing. Kaminska's crew have managed to lose communications with the Fireblade, and essentially they won't know if the Fireblade is alive until they come out the other side of the warp, if they ever do. She's absolutely gutted. Like she got taken over, ordered to follow this sort of wild goose chase, and has lost like her entire fleet almost as a reward. And now they're going through the warp. The Geller field is almost, I'd say it's like 95% effective on a normal trip, because there's always these little cracks, and it seems to be a standard procedure, like at least the way it's described here, that they have crew on board going around dealing with anyone who's suffering from warp madness, either taking them to med bays or putting them out of their misery.
And that's why they try and, like, I think they say it when they go and follow after them. They try and follow what they call like warp stable routes, because they're less likely, as you said, that Geller field protection. It's more effective if they're in a more stable route rather than just drifting in the void of the warp. And as you said, they've got I don't know what you describe them as. They're kind of, I can't, what do they call? There's a specific name for them, but they are like teams, aren't they? They just go around, making sure nothing untoward is happening while you're lost in the warp.
Almost like security patrols, really.
That's it. Exactly.
And I think like the other sort of thing is, Gellerfield or not, you're not supposed to look out of a window or a viewport, because if you look into the warp, it's enough to drive you mad, isn't it?
Yeah, madness of the warp.
Yeah. So obviously these people weren't ready for the warp jump and might have been just stood in the wrong place. So you've got that going on. They're still having a war council. Bringar wants to launch forwarding torpedoes the second they exit the warp and get into the Furious Abyss. And Motep counters saying that if you do that, you'll be shot down before you get close. And we don't even know if our technology can penetrate the hull. Again, he's disagreed with the Space Wolf and thus not made a friend there. And Motep sort of passes on and tells them everything that Zadkiel said to him about like being traitor. The only thing he doesn't tell them is that he did offer him the chance to change sides, but he keeps that to himself. Probably because he knows the second that comes out, all suspicions will be on him. So Skrow agrees with Bringar, and they both sort of say that taking no action is cowardly. I don't really know what they want to do. They're in the middle of the warp and ready for war. And
they're just itching for a fight, right?
Yeah.
That's like it's interesting that the wolves and the world eaters are very similar in their kind of outlook on this particular matter. Is that you almost need the Ultramarines and Motep there to talk sense to them, because it's like they would, anything but punching someone in the face is cowardice, and it's like you can't punch someone in the face when you're not on the same ship as them and you're in the warp and other stuff is going on. I almost feel like if this was the Space Wolf book, they'd all be dead by now. It would have finished like a long time ago.
They would have all charged and smashed themselves against the side of it, and that would have been the end of it.
That would have been it, done.
So Cestus sort of he settles them down now and says, we're all united. The 17th Legion has turned traitor. The Mechanicum may be sided with them. We need to avenge the dead, kill the traitors, and warn the War Master. We need to wait till the abyss is vulnerable, and then we can attack.
Yeah.
And Bringar sort of says, I think I can smell cowardice on this ship. And Cestus springs up out of his seat and stares him down. Before anything else can happen, the ship then shakes violently, and Bringar, again, this time he can smell that the ship is contaminated by the warp.
The warp, yeah.
And Motep says, look, I think we're compromised. Cestus says, we will reconvene when we exit the warp. And he and Antigus head to the bridge. And Kaminska says, look, come with me. I'm going to speak to the chief navigator. And we're going to work things out. And essentially, the news that they get from the navigator is that the Furious Abyss has deployed a psychic mine, which has collapsed the route behind them, like you were saying, the stable route. And all they can do now is travel blindly to where we're going, which is almost impossible and almost certainly a death sentence. But we can't stay still. We have to push forward.
Yeah.
So Cestus and Kaminska head back to the bridge, and he can sort of sense the tension between them, because obviously she hasn't wanted to do any of this, and actually starts by sort of telling her off and says, like, your attitude towards me and this mission have been noted. Remember, you serve the Emperor, and you will do well to remember that. And like we were saying in the first part, she's not nobody. And fair play to her, she turns around and says, look, you come on here, took over my ship. Like, what do you expect? I'm not a traitor. Yeah. I serve the Emperor, but I'm not willing to risk the lives of my crew on a baseless whim.
Yeah.
And even that was enough to sort of shock Cestus, because he's a starter. No one tells him anything, and she's actually told him off a bit, and he realizes, all right, I've been carried away, and apologizes to her. So I think like a little bit of respect building between the two of them.
Yeah, I think so. I think their dynamic and their relationship, I quite like as the book goes on. I think she's a really strong character.
Yeah, and like, you think, if spoilers, if this book ended differently, they'd have a bit of a future working together, I think. Or she would do well out of what, obviously get a fleet back.
Yeah,
on merit anyway. So they go their separate ways, and Kaminska gets a vox saying that they have made contact with the Fireblade. And we go to one of the security details led by a guy called Huntsman, and they're patrolling the decks, checking with the other squads, and notice a figure dart across a dark passageway ahead. And as they turn the corner, they see it in the distance. Looks like a deck crewman, but wearing a uniform of another ship, which is strange. So approaching, Huntsman readies his weapon. So after the council, however, Motep, he's still quite vexed after like Bringar's attitude of shooting him down, and like hates him regardless. Like, these guys don't even know each other, and he hates him on sort of reputation alone.
Yeah.
So he's gone back to his quarters to meditate, and he feels like more of a disturbance in the war and something wrong with the Gellerfield. So he gets his kit back on and marches out towards the primary dock, where he can sense like something's happening. And back aboard the Fireblade, Captain Ulago, he's sat on the command throne, strapped in for the bumpy ride, and it's so bumpy, in fact, that the blast doors of the bridge are ripped clean off, and the warp bursts into the bridge. And here's I don't know if we've had it before, but this is our first sort of, this is what happens if you are exposed to the warp. So initially what he sees are like vivid memories of the landscape of the planet, and just sort of hits him with any and all emotion. You can feel like some regret of leaving his home, pride of his first commission, sadness that he felt when he left his family, but he's feeling the emotions, but like 1,000-fold, like undescribably powerful. And as he's going through like all of his memories, the side of the ship is like completely ripped off, and full on exposing them to the warp, which is made of nothing but emotion. And he can see, like, the way it's described is like the sky is hatred, with a sun of love and an ocean of grief, and the winds are ripping the ship apart, like the winds of wrath.
Yeah.
And he's just in awe of everything until like a hole opens up, like a mouth, and in the atmosphere, and all he can see in the jaws is nothing but terror as it starts to devour the souls of the crew. So, like, not fun.
No, no. A quick way to go mad, and yeah, they are. Yeah, the Fireblade. Its demise is not the way anyone would really want to go.
No, and that's why we have like the Geller fields. That's what you're keeping out. That's why you don't look out the windows.
Exactly.
And so on board the bridge of the Raffle, Kaminska's crew get like some more broken vox messages from the Fireblade saying that they're still alive. We need to dock. We're damaged. We need help to survive. And she considers it, but probably sort of emotionally weakened by the losses so far. She accepts this, and she's desperate to save somebody to do something with. So she gives the order to open the bay and let them in. Meanwhile, the huntsman, he's managed to corner this mysterious figure and realizes that this guy's wearing the ruined clothes of a crewman from the Fireblade.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're not on board yet. And he radios up to the bridge and says, like, this is what's going on. And they say, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, the Fireblade's just docking now.
Yeah.
So the figure then turns in the shadow, revealing its face, and it's got a huge, like, split mouth with rows of razor sharp teeth. Needle-like teeth. Yeah. Long taloned fingers, and it lunges, and the huntsman fires. Kaminska's trying to raise huntsman on the Vox, but all she gets in return is screaming and shooting. And realizing what must have happened, she orders that the Fireblade be disengaged. Like, cancel.
Yeah.
And then they get reports back that the Fireblade has actually started shooting at them. And Cestus orders all the starlings to head to the main dock. Motep arrives and killed this creature, but too late to save the huntsman and his men, who basically, I think the way it's described, almost basically been turned into paint. There's nothing left of them. So he heads towards the dock where the crewmen are just like fleeing anyone that can, and Motep's pushing through to get there. Ahead he can see Bringar, Skrow, and two more World Eaters also moving into the dock. And as the five of them go in, they see like the remaining crew being torn apart by these demonized versions of the crew of the Fireblade. Looking around at the warp spawn, and they know now like the souls of the crew are now hellbound because of the transformation they've taken, and without hesitation they charge in to the fray and start the killing. But as Motep sort of steps forward, he can feel something else trying to infiltrate his mind and test his sanity. So I suppose, obviously, because he's akin to sort of psychic powers, he's at more risk of like the warp anyway, because he's got that. He sort of probably stands out as a bit of a beacon amongst the other Astartes.
He has that natural connection to the warp, as do all of Magnus's sons. And because of that, as I said, he can be identified as, not only is he more likely to be identified as a threat to any of these warp-bound entities, but as you said as well, he also shines when he's in the warp, because he has a much bigger psychic manifestation. So the predators of the warp, those warp-bound predators, they will seek him out like a moth to a light, because they can just follow it.
So he's sort of stuck dealing with whatever's going on in his mind. Bringar, he's smashing through like untold numbers of warp spawn, but for every one he kills, two take its place, and like to his dismay, he realised that he's being forced backwards just on sheer numbers. Off to the side, he can see Skrow. He's in a sort of a similar position, but the other two World Eaters are nowhere to be seen.
Same as the Ultramarines as well, I believe. They're all, as I said, it's just a massive volume of the bodies that are just throwing themselves. No, there's no fear, no regard for like health, as it were. They're not like fighting normal adversaries because they are just warp spawn.
Yeah, it's like a zombie plague, really. They just
Yeah.
keep coming. They then while they're fighting, suddenly it feels like they feel like the floor starts twisting and tearing, and a huge section of the wall of the dock is ripped off and sucked into space, taking some of the warp spawn with it, taking any crew that hadn't been killed yet, who were too close, have been whipped out, and everyone else is sort of gripping on and like now exposed to the warp. Bringar has to fight the urge to sort of like this natural instinct comes over him. He has to fight the urge to strip his armor down and start ripping into people with his teeth and claws.
It's the curse of the Wolfen.
Yeah,
that is actually what it is. As is with every space wolf, it's how they fight off. But yeah,
and that's it, isn't it? Like the emotions, or like the power that it magnifies anything inside you, like tenfold.
Yeah.
So where obviously like the space wolves is always there when they're in battle, but they pass that sort of trial. They can bring it back down.
Yeah.
But obviously now it's like he's really fighting it to stay like human essentially.
Yeah.
Moteb, he sort of climbed up onto the main control panel. He feels this presence, knowing that he's been seen, and he knows that this is not a battle that can be won with weapons, only with his mind. And he sort of says into his vox, he says, "It has seen me." Bringar has managed to sort of sort himself out, and he's back to back with Skrow and says, "What are you talking about?" But Moteb just says, "Get off the dock."
Yeah, you can't win this.
Yeah, I'm going to detonate the dock self-destruct system. The rest of the ship will be fine, but you need to close the blast doors, and I can clear up the warp spawn. Skrow says, "No thanks. I'm going to stay here. The sons of Angron do not flee." And Bringar actually agrees with him, and then turns and punches him like right in the chest, sends him flying through the door, and then he runs out after him.
Yeah.
As he does so, carving through the enemy to get out. And as he does, he sees a group of Ultramarines coming towards the doors, who shout, "Duck!" And as he does, they shoot over his head, keeping the swarm back. Bringar hits the command button, and they close the blast doors, locking Moteb inside. And Moteb finally sees what's responsible for this assault, rather than the numerous demons being in charge. He actually can see like a spirit, I think is the best way to describe it. And it looks to him like a large octopus-like creature with hundreds of tentacles reaching out, and each tentacle is in like the crew controlling them like puppets. And now that he's alone and not being watched by any other Astartes, he can rely on his gene mutation. This is like you said. So this is like the power that's inside every Thousand Sun, which is what has earned Magnus the wrath of the Council. But like they know, used correctly, it can be a deadly weapon.
Yeah.
And he even says here, like the Council are right to fear it. So he takes out his wand that he rescued earlier and attaches it to his scimitar, turning it into a spear. And as this creature sort of reaches towards him, he flings the spear into its face, which causes a huge explosion of light, killing this beast. On the other side of the blast doors, the Astartes are about to fuse these doors shut when the violent rumblings and screamings suddenly stop. Cestus turns, takes an account of who is there, and asks where Motep is. And Bringar says he made a noble sacrifice. I feel like I may have misjudged him earlier, as he has saved us with his actions.
Yeah.
And the Astartes sort of believe that he managed to detonate the docks self-destruct sequence, kill the warp spawn. And as they're sort of talking about it, the blast doors open. Motep staggers through, smoke searing off of his armor, and collapses into Cestus's arms, who calls for the apothecary, and Bringar scowls now. Any respect that he had completely gone, and he says, "There's only one way he managed it: sorcery."
Yeah.
And Space Wolves don't like sorcery.
That's it.
Yeah. And now it takes into chapter 8, Nicaea, Advantage, and Bacca Triumviron.
Triumvirate. That's the docks.
If I do it slowly, at least I can sort of
Triumviron.
Yeah,
but it's the docks.
Yeah, but I think I'll call it Bacca Docks for the rest of it. So there we go.
That's fine.
So Zadkiel, he is reviewing data, projecting the expected outcome of the word bearer's assault on Macragge and Calf. And the Furious Abyss alone is expected to wipe out 49% of the orbital defenses, 75% of the fleet, and 93% of the population of Macragge, with Corferon's fleet taking out the rest.
Yeah.
So the Abyss, obviously, is the heavy hammer to start this assault. On the raffle, the starters are gathered outside the med bay as Motep is being treated. As I said, Bringar's earlier respect has completely vanished. Adamant that he should be dead, and obviously he's used sorcery to survive in whatever he's done.
Yeah, he's not impressed.
No. And now Cestus is in a bit of a predicament because if Motep has used sorcery, he's gone directly against the Council of Nicaea.
Yeah.
Which completely damns him in the eyes of the Emperor. And as a result, they actually should punish him for it.
Indeed, yeah.
But Cestus is willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's unconscious and can't answer for himself.
He's also, in his mind, he's worried about the vision he's had as well. Yeah. And he's like, that, what if that, what if that was psychic? I mean, it was, but like, what if that was, like, is that also affecting, am I being, hypocritical? Could I find myself in bother here for being psychic?
Yeah, and obviously, like, Motep's going to be the only one who can sort of answer those questions for him when he gets, maybe gets the nerve up to ask.
Yeah.
Bringar's absolutely furious, demands to be let in, and I'll get the truth out of him. I don't want a heretic on this ship.
Good old Bringar.
And as he's like ranting and raving, Motep sort of wakes up and emerges and says, "Well, what do you plan to do then?" And sort of diffuses that. Skrull demands to know how he survived. But my 2 men were killed. How did you survive that? And Skrull, funnily enough, he has little memory of the actual fight because he was in a blood rage.
Yeah.
And Bringar's decided to keep it to himself about how Skrull got out the dock.
Yes.
He won't be thanked for it. And Motep tells them, and lies, obviously. He says that the self-destruct failed, but I was able to exploit a split gas line to blow the demon out of the ship.
Yeah.
And Bringar, he can smell the lie on him. And says, I can smell this stink coming from you. And Motep says maybe the smell is coming from the Space Wolves. And Bringar lunges at him, but Cestus has to sort of wrestle them apart. And
a little bit of handbags.
Yeah, and Bringar's demanding a fight, and he says, "No, look, I'm in charge. Motep will face a proper trial and not the feral laws of Fenris." And with that, Bringar storms off and very maturely says, "You are no longer my brother." And Skrull slinks off with him.
Yeah.
And we've got sort of teams forming amongst the loyalists. And Motep thanks Cestus, but Cestus snaps at him and says, "I'm not happy with your explanation, and you're staying in this cell until I decide what to do with you."
Yes.
So, like we say, tensions are high. Cestus has put his neck out for Motep, but sort of at the cost of a friendship by the look of it. And obviously, there's a lot of tension. Everyone's stressed out at what's going on. So Zadkiel elsewhere is now given a sermon in a cathedral to 100 Astartes of the 7th Company called the Quillborn.
Yeah.
He's telling them that the warp has helped them destroy more of the enemy. And in the crowd, he sees Altis, which displeases him.
Yeah, he's not happy about that. What I found, it's a quick tangent, what I found quite interesting about this is that the word bearers, because the way they're described, the word bearers themselves, their legion is split into chapters of 1,000 Space Marines. The Quillborn are one of those chapters, because they're all vat grown on cultists, so they're all like grown gene labs on cultists. Okay. What I found quite interesting is that so it's the reason they're called Quillborn is they're built in these gene labs, and so they're already written, like that's their life is written, their service is written, so that's why they're called the Quillborn. Okay. But like there's these chapters already in the word bearers. What I find really interesting is that obviously once the heresy's done, that setup for the legions is what Rabute Guilliman adopts. In his codexes, like, because he's like, no, actually, what we're gonna do is break down into chapters, which is what the word bearers were doing already. So I found that quite when I like read that bit or listened to that bit, I was like, oh, that's quite an interesting through line that, you know, no one really seems to pick up on, that the word bearers were doing the whole chapter thing before Guilliman even wrote it into his Codex Astartes.
Yeah, obviously, one final barb towards, because they don't get on, do they? Lorgar and Guilliman aren't necessarily. They weren't friends, were they?
They don't like each other, and it came down to the humbling of the chapter at, I can't remember what planet it was, but so this comes up in other books as well. But again, one for the lore heads is that when the Emperor decided to tell off Lorgar because his chapter, the word bearers, were taking too long. All of the compliance and stuff like that they were doing was taking ages and ages, because they weren't just taking over worlds, they were like turning them into shrines to the Emperor. They were getting everyone to worship the Emperor, and like Lorgar has always said, like, no, he's like, you know, he's almost a god to us. We will worship him. And then the Emperor said, no, you've got to stop this, and so turned up on one of their planets with the Ultramarines and said, you know, now you've got to stop. And it was that turned him. As that was when he was like, right, well, if you're not going to accept my worship, I will find gods that will. And obviously he was helped in that decision by the likes of Corferon and Erebus. But that's why the hatred of the Ultramarines comes from, is because when they were brought to heel by the Emperor, it was the Ultramarines that were there to back up the Big E, as it were, to make sure it happened.
Yeah. So like Guilliman's obviously, he knows a good idea when he sees one, regardless whether it comes from his least favourite brother.
Indeed, yeah.
Zadkiel's giving the sermon, and he's giving more encouragement. The warp is their ally, and we will prevail using it. But we must detour now to the Backer docks. Yep. He doesn't tell them that the ship suffered damage. So essentially, the Waning Moon got off a lucky strike, damaging exterior coolant and fuel supplies to the lower decks. And because of his overconfidence, they have to actually stop and make urgent repairs.
Yeah.
But we'll keep that to himself for now. And the damage to the Furious Abyss didn't go unnoticed by the loyalists who detected the leaking coolant lines, and meaning that in order for the Furious Abyss to actually stay ahead, it would suffer from the plasma core overheating. Yeah. So they know they need to stop and repair, because otherwise it's going to burn itself out. And essentially, like, knowing the system, they've realised that that is where it's going to head. It's the biggest, most well-equipped sort of place to handle the Furious Abyss.
So, yeah, I was going to say it's the only place within range or whatever that is big enough to actually take on a ship of that size.
Yeah. So they start making their plans for how they're going to take out the Furious Abyss once it's docked. And now Zadkiel is talking to the Wordbearer's arch champion, Corferon, through one of the supplicants, giving them an update of his progress. And essentially, Corferon's not impressed that he's given him this massive weapon of a ship, and he's already got to stop for repairs. And even more annoying is that he's being pursued by Ultramarines.
Yes.
So he's basically given him a telling off. And sort of mentioned that there is another detachment of wordbearers led by a guy called Sor Talgron. They're in place near Terra, and they're maintaining a pretense of loyalty to the Emperor and waiting for a signal to show their true selves. So Corferon tells him that the rest of the word bearers are with him, and we're mustering just away from Calth, ready to strike. We need, obviously, the Abyss to make the first move, and then the word bearers will unleash hell. And then he essentially hangs up the comlink, and as a result, the supplicant dies, used up. And just to add to Zadkiel's telling off, Altis arrives.
Good old Altis.
Just by, I think this is it now. He's turned up one too many times. He's just had a telling off. Altis has probably overheard some of this. So Zadkiel, in his mind, starts hatching a plan against this young upstart. So eventually, the Raffle is able to leave warp space, re-enter real space. However, it is followed by the Fireblade, which is now just a zombie ship. Kabinska sadly gives the order to blow it up, and that is the end of the Fireblade and the end of the fleet as it was, leaving the Raffle alone. And they come into view of the docks, and they launch 3 battleships to the furthest point away from the Furious Abyss in order to avoid detection. In these boats are Skrow and half of the World Eaters, and Bringar and his Blood Claws in another. And in the third ship are the rest of the World Eaters led by Antigus. Cestus had wanted to go and leave the rest of the Ultramarines behind in case something went wrong in reserve, but Antigus argued that, look, you're in charge, you need to remain behind and lead. Like, you're not expendable.
Without him, there's no mission. So you keep going.
Cestus eventually agreed. Obviously, he would rather go, but he finally sort of sees sense. And the plan is for the Loyalists to dash across the full length of the dockyard in their 3 squads, attacking, cause confusion and as much death and damage to the engines and ordnance ports, stop this ship from leaving the docks. So the Furious Abyss docked, Altis and a security detail disembark. They give orders for the menial workers to repair the ship, and they come off friendly as if they are loyalists, to avoid raising suspicion.
At this point, all of the dock workers, because the what's it, not harbour master, but the port master is like, you know, what's going on? Like, you should have told me this massive ship was going to show up. And like, because they're Astartes, and as far as he's concerned, they're loyalists, because there's no other type of Astarte. He's like, oh, okay, fine, you know, get on with it, we'll do it, and so on and so forth. So they get to work doing everything, and Altis and I can't remember the name of the captain, but the strike force that's with him are just, you know, they're on edge, but they're keeping up the pretense, so that they can get stuff done. And I think Altis reports back in on a like quiet comms network, or on a, you know, just in his Vox, on a secure line to say, yep, no one suspects anything. They've taken us as starties, so are affecting the repairs for us.
Yeah. Not that they would suspect anything, surely. Like, it's just a unnecessary bad guy showing off, isn't it? Like, they're all at it. And I think the captain's Balinor goes with
That's
him.
it. Yeah.
Cool. And that is chapter 9, Infiltration, Ambush, and Sons of Angron. And we're in for it now. I love this. I love this bit. So the loyalists, they disembark, begin their stealthy run across the dockyard, staying in cover, avoiding not only the mindless servitors, but the dock crew as well, because obviously we've got loyalist word bearers on one end, and obviously them running across the docks is going to sound some alarms, so they're being stealth. Bringar is on one of the flanks. He's dressed up in his full battle gear, all sorts of furs and trophies dangling from his armor, and he's running in as if this is his final stand.
Yeah,
he's sort of still seething at Cestus, and he's going to use that annoyance and aim it towards his new enemy. Cestus and Kaminska, they're on the bridge of the raffle watching the progress of the men through some hacked CCTV.
Yeah.
And Cestus takes a moment to praise her for her service and thank her for doing what she's been doing. And Kaminska says, look, I would have done this anyway. The Saturnine fleet is outdated and we were due to be decommissioned. So I'm coming to the end of my career. This isn't obviously the way that I want to go, but she's obviously pleased to serve at least. And again, as we said, building on their sort of mutual respect. Scrow, however, he is leading his force along the center of the dock, and his berserker rage is boiling within him. He's been held back from lashing out for quite a while now because they've been trapped on that ship. The Sons of Angron have the same neural technology as their Primarch, which unleashes this deadly potential. And now, similar to the Thousand Sons, the Emperor censored the use of the tech that they have.
Yeah.
Angron, unlike the others who have sort of been a bit diplomatic, he completely ignored it, and he's just said, no, you guys carry on. And he's ordered them all to move up quietly and without incident. However, Scrow has allowed his squad to get their blood up and tone their battle skills, and en route they're leaving a trail of dead workers as they go. These are the good guys.
They're just hacking people apart. They're like, yeah. Off we go. Just chopping people down.
So we've got traitorous word bearers on one side, smiling, giving the thumbs up and getting on with it. And then we've got loyalist world eaters just killing.
Yeah, they're having fun. They're taking it down.
These aren't traitor docks. They're loyal Emperor abiding docks, and the workers are getting killed for their
trouble.
So unfortunately for that, Altis has spotted this on the security feed, and he's shown the dockmaster and asks whereabouts this is happening. And the dockmaster says, "Oh, they're currently at the fuel stores." And looking at it, he's actually shocked that it's a group of Astartes are killing his men. And as a reward for his helpful information, Altis shoots this guy in the face.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? So following in his lead, Altis's men then they take that as action, and they open fire on the rest of the workers and prepare to face the loyalists. Because why wouldn't you just kill the random humans that are in the way? Like clear the space. So Scrow and his group, they're getting close when suddenly a squad of word bearers appear ahead and start shooting at them. And at least 5 of the world eaters are killed by bolt fire or exploding fuel barrels.
Yep.
And any workers unlucky enough to exist are either shot down by both sides indiscriminately. And with that, Scrow gives the order to charge. And he just hears like the explosions going off, and he turns his squad and begins to head in that direction. when he notices a group of word bearers appear on the rafters above. He's able to jump out of the way as bolter and plasma rain down on him, but one of the world eaters gets a plasma blast right in the chest. His men pull him aside, but they're not able to save him. But actually, they just use the corpse as cover to help him get up, and returning fire, Antigus radios in for backup. And after a moment, the word bearers up on the rafters are blown away by a covering fire when Antigus notices the loading ramps on the Furious Abyss are lowered and 200 robed soldiers emerge and charge the Astartes. I don't think these aren't Astartes. These are just like, I guess, cultists. If you play the game, the equivalent of that.
I was going to say they're like well, they talked about it already, like the supplicants. They're like human fodder, right? But they're as you said, cultists. They're entirely sucked into the word of Lorgar and are mindless in terms of their devotion. Yeah.
So whereas a lot of the crew we've come across so far probably just crew, these guys are probably these are traitor humans who are indoctrinated. So these guys come out and Antigus and his men charge back and they start cutting through these guys well enough, but there's obviously 200 against, I think, 10 in this group. So they are slowed down. And more of these guys keep pouring out of the ship.
Yeah, and they make a point of saying that, the Astartes are, like the finest like troops because they know no fear. Like they don't have that fear. And normally when they're fighting Xenos or even other misguided humans, they always break them. It's their opponents always have some kind of fear of dying, whereas the Astartes don't have that. Yeah. And then what they're fighting these cultists or these word bearer serfs is that they're like them. They're not breaking. They don't have any fear. There's hundreds of them, and they just can't. Normally, they'd be broken and fleeing in terror, but they just can't break them down, so they have to fight their way through them.
Yeah, and they probably obviously they know they've got numbers, and that's it. They're just pouring out of this ship. Eventually, they'll get some of these Astartes down.
Yeah,
and you got to think if you survive this and get back, and you manage to take down an Astartes, you're gonna do pretty well, aren't you, for promotion? If that's what they do in these cults. So something has to be done to these men. No matter how many they kill, they're not breaking. They keep coming. Antigus hacking away feels a pain in his side. It's either a knife or a bullet got him, and he's sort of he's obviously not injured in the normal sense, but he's taken aback that he's actually been wounded. And in the split second it takes for him to sort of stop and think about it, he's pulled down to the ground by a group of soldiers and lost in the swarm.
Yeah.
Bringar, who was the one who took out the word bearers, who ambushed Antigus, he's now stuck in another firefight with a different group, and one of the Bloodclaws is able to get off a sling of metal grenades and brings this tower down.
Yeah.
Absolutely, bringing them down, crushing a group of word bearers. But sacrificing himself because I think he takes a hail of bolt fire for his trouble.
It is, but there's two of the Bloodclaws charge in there with these melter bombs, and the first guy just doesn't get close. He gets torn apart, whereas the second Bloodclaw gets there, manages to lay the melter thing on there, and he gets a hail of fire incoming, but manages to let out like a howl as he sets it off and blows himself up as well as them.
Yeah, and we all know a good howl from a space wolf gets everyone else's blood up as well.
That's it. They all start going for
it. And he howls us into chapter 10, and that takes us into the belly of the beast, sacrifice, and my future is written. So still fighting, Antigus is pulled back to his feet by Skrull. His men are butchering these soldiers, and Antigus takes a second. He's just been saved to just look at how brutal the World Eaters are, and he's sort of disgusted by the way that they fight, and has to fight an urge to stop them doing their job.
Yeah,
which is a really weird take because like they're all there killing, and he just doesn't like the way that they kill.
Yeah, well, because I think there's a point where he's talking and like Skrull as like he's got like the glazed eyes look on his face, but he's listening to him, and like behind him is another World Eater who's literally just butchering some dude on the floor. It's like,
yeah.
I think that's the point where he's like, you know, the Ultramarines are like, you know, oh, we'll do this clean and efficiently, like, you know, bolter to the head, or you know, I'll hack you in half with my sword, but then I'll leave you alone in a dignified pile of, you know, blood.
It's like,
whereas, yeah, the World Eaters are having none of that. They're just, you know, they'll hack you to death and then just keep hacking at your dismembered corpse until it's paste.
Yeah, it's like there's the truth. There's killing and there's killing. Like when Marge becomes a real estate agent and she's trying to tell the truth, and Lionel Hutz, or no, is it Lionel Hutz? He's like, there's the truth and the
truth. Yeah.
So that's a bit what's going on here. So yeah, you can kill, but do it nicely, please.
Yeah.
So because they managed to clear enough of the enemy, there's now a sort of empty path, and they can get onto the abyss. So they charge towards that. Those that have survived, in Aegis and Skrow's group. Bringar's squad start to charge, but they get stuck through the wreckage. And now another set of ambushing word bearers have appeared.
Yeah.
I mean, they're every time they're able to sort of take a step forward, another ambush happens, and they're just bogged down. And to like Bringar's disgust, like they just can't break through and catch up with the rest.
Yeah, he knows he can't get there, and I think he's let out another howl at this point. And I think what is it? Antigus and Skrull and their 20 odd. However many are left now of the World Eaters, they're going to get into the Furious Abyss via a cooling or some nefarious. They're not going in the front door. Let's put it that way.
They found an unprotected sort of portal to get in, haven't they?
Yeah, but as you said, in the meantime, Bringar and his Blood Claws in battle with a World Eater squad. I can't remember because Altis is knocking around here. Is he down yet?
No, not yet. I think.
This is the bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, we're coming up to that. So, so Antigus, his squad finally get through like the normal humans and close towards the abyss, where they are then met with a security squad of Astartes from the word bearers, and here Antigus is forced to kill the first Astartes, which now sort of grounds him into reality. Everything that's going on, like it's real now. Like it was just normal until now. He's had to kill the unkillable essentially, and as he's sort of thinking about it, he almost gets clawed with a power maul, but luckily he reacts quick enough and he gets locked in into hand to hand with this guy, and he looks through the enemy's eye lens and looks into the eye of his brother and sees nothing but hatred.
Yeah.
And as this word bearer is about to overpower him, Skrull smashes him aside and kills him. And he looks at Antigus and says, "Is this too intense for you, Ultramarine?" And they carry on. Bringar and his Blood Claws, they manage to smash through lots of resistance, but like by this point, they're not catching up. He's got 3 more Blood Claws laying dead at the feet of a veteran word bearer captain, who's got a two-handed power sword swinging in his grip. He charges, and Bringar charges, and the word bearer gets a glancing blow alongside Bringar's shoulder. Bringar spins, bringing his axe along this guy's back, who in turn spins, slapping the flat of his blade against Bringar's arm, forcing him to drop his bolter. Bringar lunges at him, tapping his rune on his hilt, exposes a long blade and plunges it into this guy's bicep, tearing through the flesh and muscle, and then dispatches the captain with a blade across his throat. And as this guy's going down and bleeding out, the wolves are then forced into cover as another squad of word bearers emerge, and they just recover the body of this captain before they withdraw back to the ship, whilst pinning the wolves down. And Bringar, from his position, can see Antigus and the World Eaters closing towards the abyss as the engines come to life. And he's gutted. He can't get close. In frustration, him and the Bloodclaws let out another almighty howl. They love it. They love a bit of howling.
I do. Yeah, that's it. Keep howling.
So Antigus, Skrow, and 3 World Eaters were all that survived and were all that were able to get onto the abyss alive. They're on and they're running because they're already being pursued by patrols who have seen them get on board, and they're keeping themselves out of harm's way, moving down into the underbelly of the ship. They get cornered at one point, and they cut a hole in the ceiling and pull themselves through and find themselves in the engine rooms. And these engine rooms are like enormous compared to anything that they're used to seeing. They sort of compare it to like a cathedral just for machinery, because it's so big, but there's also like scripture embedded into everything. And it's a bit of a strange environment for them. And they sort of realised the explosives they brought with them are not enough to cripple the ship if they just attack blindly. So we're going to move out, find the ordnance bays and try and blow up the explosives and make a bigger bang. And Skrow says, well, if we do that, we'll never find our way out. And he just says, no, we won't be getting out. And Skrow nods and orders his men to follow. And they know that they're on a suicide mission now. And as they're sort of moving on, they realise that all the menial workers are sort of sneaking out of the chamber. And Skrow realises and shouts for his men to get into cover as the word bearers appear and start firing on them. Unfortunately, one of the World Eaters gets hit in the chest, which knocks him over the rail, and he's pushed down and crushed by giant pistons. Another one gets his arm blown off, and T just grabs him, drags him into cover. As they're running for it, and this guy, although Antigus is pulling him along, just gets a load of bolts for his back, killing him. And Skrow sees like these 2 of his men have died, and saves the anger for later when he can use it. So the 3 survivors manage to get to a storage corridor, block the door, but know like they've got a lot of word bearers trying to get through, and they won't be able to hold this forever. And the last nameless World Eater says, I'll stay and hold them off, and you guys go ahead. So the others they get away, and they hear in the background a short but very violent exchange of gunfire, and then silence before the footsteps of the hunters come after them. And eventually they come out into another large chamber. Seeing it for what it is disgusts Antigus as he looks around, seeing pillars and statues and the altar and pulpit at the far end of the church, a direct violation of the Emperor's wishes. And they are about to start smashing the place up in anger when a voice comes over the box telling them there is no escape. At the altar is Sergeant Commander Reskill with his troops. And he tells them to surrender and throw down their arms. Obviously, Skrow and Antigus aren't having that, and they question why these guys have reverted to primitive beliefs. And Reskill moves forward, telling them to come out, speak to him brother to brother, and we'll illuminate you. Skrow loses it, shouts, "You're no brother of mine." And Antigus tries to get him to prepare to be fired on, but Skrow just launches himself and charges forward.
Having none of that.
Yeah, and not only is he charging like some distance, he lobs his roaring chain axe straight at Reskill, taking one of his hands off.
That is very cool, that bit.
Yeah, it just powers out of nowhere. And he just can't believe what he's seeing, but like reacts, lays down cover and fire, moves on up. Skrow moves so fast that like nobody, even like the word bearers, couldn't react. And he's just able to sort of pick them off as they stood there in stunned silence, watching this lunatic run towards them, and smashes them aside. So Reskill, and Skrow gets close enough, smashing people aside with his shield. Reskill screams out that this is sacred ground, and Skrull smashes his shield across this guy's face, sending him flying.
Yeah.
Picks up his axe and gets back to work. And he just catches up to the melee. Reskill's dragged out of the room by like some of his men, and Skrull sort of stops to nod to Antigus, like to say thanks for the backup. And Antigus gets a bullet straight into the back, which penetrates his armor. As he looks down, he sees a hole in the front of his armor and slumps down to the ground, leaning up against a pillar. Antigus is able to keep shooting at the enemy, and Skrull is about to run back to try and save him. And Antigus tells him to go as a grenade rolls, lands next to him, and explodes, ending the Ultramarine. And Skrull has no choice and runs from the church, his shield keeping the worst of the bullets off of him, and he keeps running alone. Wasn't expecting Antigus to go.
Antigus to fall. I think as soon as they got to the point where he was like, we're not going back, you're like, okay, well that's it then. Like obviously he's going to go, but yeah, he's been a pretty pivotal. Well, I say pivotal. He's been a good counterbalance to Cestus, and yeah. I think Cestus is like he's been watching like the blips and the tactical display, and he knows this is happening as well. And obviously knows it's not gonna end well. No. But yeah, it is a bit unexpected, given what we've known so far. But then at the same time, as I said, it's quite a cool, heroic, very Ultramarine honor and glory way to go out.
Yeah, and you can sort of see like if you can really easily like envision that where. Like they've stopped. Skrull's just sort of he's finished off that squad. They both stop, turn, look at each other. They have that nod of respect, and then, like you could just hear it like in silence. That bit like Lord of the Rings, where those arrows take him out, and as Boromir dies, and sort of that the sad music playing, and sort of like that.
Homo.
So. No, but is that our first major character killed in this book so far?
I think yes. It is. Yeah. Well, yeah, it is. It is because everyone else that's been killed up to this point, we haven't really known enough of them. Like when the crew and the captains of the other ships were dying, we knew that. Like what they were close with Kaminska, but we'd never really spent any time building them up. Whereas, with Antigus, you kind of know who he is to a degree because it's been built up from the very beginning. Like he's very much Cestus's number two. He's like they disagree, but he's kind of sticking up for him. Like he's understanding what he's doing, and so. Yeah, it was like as soon as he went on this mission, you're like, okay, this could be rough anyway. Yeah. And it's definitely transpired that way.
Yeah. Probably not the death that he envisioned. He probably thought he'd be the one doing the ultimate sacrifice, blowing the ship up as well.
Yeah.
But
alas.
Yeah, that's a shame. And then, so just to finish this chapter, then Zadkiel has been watching everything from his monitors. Obviously not gone completely the way it was planned. Captain Balanos has been mortally wounded by Bringar, but his body was recovered, and he has ideas how this guy can still serve the Legion.
He will, yeah, he'll serve the Legion.
He's actually, the one consolation he's got is Altis has been buried out in the rubble, and he's probably dead somewhere. So he's taking a bit of joy in that. And Reskill updates him and says there's one enemy left loose on the ship. He orders Reskill to hunt him down. And we're going to be taking off now to prevent the raffle from closing in. But Reskill says, look, what about the men that are still out fighting on the docks? And Zadkiel tells him that sacrifice is a lesson worth learning.
Yeah.
What a hero. So Zadkiel gives the order to take off. The engines kick to life. Anyone who was too close to the ship is melted on the spot. And laying in the wreckage, watching the ship leave, is Altis, betrayed. And as he lays there, he looks up and sees a big, burly, smelly space wolf standing over him, and the last thing he sees is an armored fist coming towards his head, and fade to black.
That's I did like the end of that chapter. I like Bringar leans over him and like you can hear his voice like saying to him like he calls him like a traitor whelp, and then punches him in the face. It's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the end of chapter 10. We will now wrap up now, and we'll come back in the next episode as the story progresses. So before we do wrap up, thoughts on where we're at so far, mate?
I mean, exactly halfway through. It's been, as we said in the last episode, it's a, it is one of those ones. It's action movie-esque, right? So we've moved from set piece to set piece. We had the opening one where we've established the characters, like the bromances and stuff like that, and we've then moved into, we've had like the unveiling of the bad guy and his Bond villain-esque plan. And then off the back of that, we've then got like the first engagement where obviously we've got the space battle. We've got a bit of distrust between the good guys and the bad guys. And then in this 5 chapters, like as I said, this is the one where we've had like a big engagement on Bacca, and it feels like it's felt very action heavy. Like there's a lot of cool combat. It's all small squad actions as well, so it's interesting. It's hard to keep up with how many people are still left alive. But the good guys have taken a bit of a battering here, really, because we know that there's probably at least 4 or 5 blood claws down. We know that all of the World Eaters are effectively gone. So you've got like the 9 more Ultramarines left on the ship. Plus you've got the 15, let's say, maybe less blood claws. And that's it. So that's all they've got left, and they haven't succeeded in the mission that they were going to go and do, because only Skrull is alive on the Furious Abyss. So really look at it that the word bearers are they've got the upper hand, and they've really had the upper hand all the way through, because all the best laid plans are just not coming together for Cestus in his attempt to waylay, to destroy, and to effectively save what he considers to be the doom of the Ultramarines if the Furious Abyss gets through. So it's been enjoyable. I said I think there's twists of intrigue yet to come, because they have now got a captive, thanks to Bringar. Had it been a word bearer, had it been a World Eater, we don't know whether they'd have a captive.
Well, on that as well, how do you think it would have gone if Skrull, they were going to battle, if they just hadn't killed and left a trail of dead bodies behind? Do you think they would have got a bit closer?
I don't know. Because as I said, I was thinking that earlier when I was listening to these 5 chapters again today, and as I was listening to it, I was like, I don't know, because they were taking them down, and they were still being stealthy about it. But obviously, at one point, the portmaster or whatever like looked at his CCTV and was like, "Hang on, there's loads of corpses down there." So I think they probably could have done it in a more measured approach and maybe got a bit more of a jump on them. I still think, based on the numbers that we saw in terms of how many said, I still think they would have struggled to get to the Furious Abyss in any way the numbers they want. And I suppose the biggest thing that they've got is that even when they get there, and we know this now, like the ship's so big, like as Antigua said herself, like we can't just go in there and drop grenades willy-nilly. We have to hit like the ordnance, or the actual generators, because otherwise we're not going to scuttle the ship. And they weren't able to find it, and now there's just one of them knocking around, just Skrull. So I know what you mean, but no, I don't think it would have played out much different. They might have just lost maybe they would have had a few more men on the ship instead of the 3 of them that eventually got on there.
Yeah, maybe. Cool. So unless you've got any other final thoughts?
No, looking forward to the next half.
Cool. So before we go, as always, please do check us out on Instagram. Obviously, if you're following the podcast, every episode we, as well as Dave, Shane, Tom, Glenn and myself, we talk about all the models and the armies that we're painting and the battles that we're having, and update you there. So do check out our pictures on Instagram. Use the hashtag in your posts, Iron and Ceramite, and we'll pop your work up on the story, just to sort of promote your page as well. And thank you for listening and following along. Come join us on Facebook. We've got a little group on there where we also do a bit more social interaction on there and talk about our stuff and give tips and share tips and tricks and stuff. We're on Twitter. Check us out on there as well. Obviously, if you're watching, you already know we're on YouTube. Do all the good stuff. Please like, share, subscribe. If you think there's someone else that might enjoy our ravings about books, get them involved. We'd appreciate it. And obviously, if you are listening, we're on all good podcast services. We've got a Twitch. We've used it once. We'll try and use it some more. Hopefully, I'll get around to playing some more Space Marine or something else eventually. We do have a Patreon. So if you do want to help support the channel and help us get some more sort of equipment, we can start filming some battle reports. Any money that we do obviously get from you guys will go straight back into the channel just to sort of up production levels. And as a reward, if you do, the only thing we sort of offer is we'll stick your name in the credits as a big thank you. We'll promote your Instagram or whatever else that you have going on if you want to get your name out there as well, just to say thank you. And lastly, if you use the link in the video or on any of our profiles for Element Games, for your hobby stuff, you'll get some money off anyway. And as a thank you for sending you, we get a little bit of a kickback, no extra cost to yourself. And again, any money that we make will go back into the channel. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please do check out the rest of our stuff, and we'll see you on the next episode for part 3. Awesome. Right. See you later, mate.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.
All right. Good stuff.
As always, we would like to thank you for listening to our Iron and Ceramite podcast. If you liked us, then you can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and any other good podcast services. Just remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.